Hello, I'm Jim Richards. I want to welcome you to Impact CyberChurch. Right now, you're going to church with people all over the world. And, every week, tens of thousands of people come to this website and feed on the Word of God. Because you know something? There are people who out there who understand what's going on. There are people that understand that this is the time to step up, throw off all the bonds of religion, get my heart healed and whole, baptized in the love of God, so that I can help others during the times that we're facing. I'm going to tell you something. This is the day of the disciple. This is the day of the person who says, you know what, I am not playing games. I'm living for God. I'm applying the truth. I'm following Jesus with my whole heart. You know something? Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my broken heart and what had to happen in my life to help me get past all of these issues. So maybe you can relate to it. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Be sure and get my free download, The Devastating Power of Pain. I want to help you get free from the power of pain in the past so that you can go on to an incredible life. If you haven't been following this series so far, just let me remind you, we're talking about healing your broken heart. The name of the series is Freedom from Emotional Debt. But that emotional debt that is in our life, that's all of the unresolved pain of the past that accumulates like debt on a revolving credit card. And every time we have an opportunity for happiness in our life, something rises up within us and we will self-sabotage. We'll make the wrong decision. We'll get mad at the wrong person. We'll trust the wrong person. Some dysfunction will emerge and it seems like our opportunities just flee away from us. And all of that is the result of having a broken heart. This is why we have to get these things healed. This is why Jesus came on the scene, and his very first message was about the promise of him coming to heal our broken hearts and to show us what our part in that process was as well as his part. Let me always remind you of this. What Jesus did is an exchange. And in an exchange, there are two parts. What Jesus did was every aspect of salvation, health, wholeness, healing, deliverance, freedom, prosperity, peace, joy, all of those things. Jesus acquired all of those things for us through his death, burial, and resurrection. We have a part, and our part is to believe the truth, and because we believe what Jesus has done for us, we put off the old man. We put away every concept of thinking that that's who we are, or thinking that those things have dominion over us, or thinking that we have to give in to pain, or thinking that life can't be any better than it already is. And we renew our minds based on what we have received in the Lord Jesus, and then we put that on. That's the new man. We put on that new identity. We put on that new person in the Lord Jesus, and we do that because we believe the truth. And so I want you to understand that wholeness comes about whenever we have, in fact, put on the new man, because the process of putting on the new man, it really is the process of putting off the old man, renewing our mind, which opens our eyes. You know, Jesus said, I want to open the eyes of the blind. And we know he opened physical eyes. We know thousands of blind people were healed. I have no argument that I've seen hundreds of blind people healed in crusades around the world. So I accept that. But in that passage, he's talking about opening the eyes of your heart so that you have the capacity to see what has been freely given to you through the Lord Jesus Christ. And because you have that capacity to see it, you make a decision. You know, in the book of Isaiah, it says, it talks about to set free these prisoners who sit in darkness. When he talks about freedom for the captives, he cast out demons everywhere. I'm not against casting out demons. I believe that's real. I've cast out demons. But in the context of this scripture, when he talks about setting the captives free, he's talking about people who are captive by their perception. They're captive by the darkness. They're captive by the way they see the world around them, and even the way they see God and see themselves, because they see it in darkness. They don't see it based on the light of God's absolute word. But I want you to understand something. If you have a broken heart in particular areas where your heart is broken, you will never rise above how that affects you until it is absolutely resolved. You know, the book of Proverbs, chapter 12, verse 6 says this. It says, the words of the wicked words, which are crooked words, which are words that are not aligned with God's truth. It says they lie in wait for blood. Now you say, what in the world does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means that these words that have been spoken to us, and we've heard them and we've believed them, and because we didn't know we could send them away, because we didn't know what we could do about it, these words actually went into us and became a part of our cellular memory. They became a part of our identity. They became a part of who we are. And because these words that other people spoke, the way other people define us has become a part of our identity, because of that, we are always going to function in that identity until that situation is resolved. You know, for me growing up, and just like for everybody, you know, the deepest need that everybody has is just to truly feel loved and feel safe. You know, when you feel loved and feel safe, that nurtures a great self-worth. That nurtures the freedom to experiment, the freedom to be yourself. You know, so many people don't feel loved, they don't feel valuable, they don't feel precious, and they don't feel safe. Some people don't feel safe emotionally because they get criticized, they get put down, they have they have people talk to them and say negative, horrible things to them. And then some people don't feel safe physically because they face the threat of violence. And you know, for me, it was more initially the fear and the threat of violence that made my world completely unsafe. You know, some of you have heard me talk about this before. The very first emotion that I can remember in my life was hatred and murder. And you know, we lived in this was in the early 1950s, and we lived in one of these little houses. Every now and then I'll drive back by that little house in Tullahoma, Tennessee, and I can't even imagine it's big enough for a whole family of people to live in. But we lived in this little house, and we didn't even have bedroom doors. You had curtains over the bedrooms, which means everything that happened in the house, everybody heard it. So when my father would show up and he would be drunk and in a violent mood, you know, he would beat my mother, and as little children, we would lay in bed and listen to it. And man, it was heartbreaking. I can't tell you the nights I went to sleep when my mom was begging for her life, and you know, we were wondering if we would wake up tomorrow and our mom would be dead. I mean, we just didn't know. And you know, I want to say this about my dad. First of all, before my dad crossed over, he gave his life to Jesus. And we had a healthy relationship. And I'm not telling any of these stories to make my dad sound bad. I'm just telling you what happened. You know, he had his own personal journey. And I'll also tell you this about my dad, is that what influenced him the most and made him so mean was religion. He grew up in a denomination and that believed that if you got a divorce, that you were going to go to hell. And so he reached the idea that if he could force my mom to divorce him, then she would go to hell and he wouldn't. So he wouldn't just leave, even though he was very seldom around. He wouldn't just leave. He needed for her to leave. And so that's why he did the things that he did instead of just walking away. But you know, my probably one of my very earliest, if not the earliest memory that I have is as my father was abusing my mother, getting up out of bed and hiding behind one of those curtains in the doorway. And my idea was, because I would have to go through my mother and father's bedroom to get to the kitchen, and in the kitchen we had some what we call butcher knives. I don't know, you know, today I'm sure there's more intelligent terminology for them, but a butcher knife was just a great big knife. And I remember hiding behind this curtain and thinking that if I could just stay awake until they went to sleep, that I could sneak past their bed, get into the kitchen, get a butcher knife, and cut his throat in his sleep. Now, that was probably 4 years old. So I grew up in a world of hatred. Now, fortunately, our father didn't really abuse us. I mean, there was emotional abuse, but there wasn't physical abuse. But we had to watch our mother being abused, and of course, we were desperately, desperately poor. And because we were so poor, because my mother actually was the breadwinner, when my brother and sister got in school, there was no one to take care of me. So my mother would have to send me to stay with my grandmother for weeks at a time because my brother and sister were in school. She was working, and we didn't have a car. So, once transportation was arranged for me to get there, it wasn't all that easy, for me to get there and back because my grandmother lived in the next little city over, which was about 14 or 15 miles away. Well, going and staying with my grandmother brought about one of the really, really dark aspects of my life. And the ultimate influence that this had on my life, and I'll share with you a little bit about how it got there, was the belief that I was unlovable and that, of course, love was never going to work out. So I blew up every relationship I ever had as a young man and on up into my adult life. Listen, I'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go away. As I already told you, Freedom from Emotional Debt is one of those series that's going to be a life changer for you. You are going to get the tools to finally overcome the pain of your past. Finally stop dragging all of this emotional baggage around that you've had all of your life. No need for counseling, no need for deliverance, no need to keep trying to work it through because you're going to find the solutions and you and Jesus are going to work this out yourself. You want to get this today. Well, as I was sharing with you, the darkest period of my belief system was probably developed through the time that I spent with my grandmother. And let me say this about my grandmother. I believe my grandmother must have probably been abused in some way, emotionally or some way. My grandmother, in so many ways, was good to us. She helped us financially. We would have starved to death many times if it hadn't been for my grandmother. She bought us clothes from time to time. She did so many things to help us. I don't know if she begrudged doing those things. I don't know what her issue was. But I know this. My grandmother really loved my sister and even my half-sister that used to spend time with her. And so it seemed that my grandmother's major issue was either just with men in general, and for a time I wondered if she just had an issue with my mother, but she had 3 kids and she emotionally destroyed one of her sons. And she tried to emotionally destroy my mother. And then she had a 3rd son that went away to the Navy when he was about 16 or 17 years old. And he was never there. And of course, he was the perfect son in her mind. So it wasn't just men. It wasn't just my mom. I don't know what it was, but my grandmother had an angry, very, very dark side to her life. And so as a child, she tormented me. Now the thing was, remember, this is back in the 50s. This would have been 1954, 1955, 1956, right in through there. We didn't even know anything about emotional abuse. I mean, we knew when we were being abused, but there were no definitions. You didn't talk about those things, and those were the kind of things that, I can remember telling my family members things that my grandmother did to me, and nobody believed me until years and years later, and they began to see these things manifest, when she couldn't take care of them. But my grandmother, because of her attitude toward my mother, she pretty much always tried to make my mother look bad to me and tried to convince me somehow that my mother really didn't love me, that she wasn't a good person, and that she didn't love me. And so there were just always these little remarks. But mixed in with these remarks were just this incredible torment. My grandmother at night, I can't tell you how many, we lived, by the way, she lived 2 houses away from a cemetery. And so she was always telling me ghost stories and telling me stories about dead people coming out of that cemetery. And she would usually always wait until nighttime to tell me these stories. And of course, I'm a little kid, I'm 4 or 5 years old, and just be so incredibly frightened at night when I would go to sleep. And many times she would make me sleep by myself after telling me these stories because she knew that I was horrified. And so one of the things that she used to do is we would sit down and she would say, look, I'm going to tell your fortune. And she'd get a deck of cards. Well, she wasn't a fortune teller. She was just using this to frighten me. She'd get a deck of cards and she would start flipping these cards out and she'd say, oh, this is bad. This is bad. And then she'd flip, and I'm thinking, bad? What do you mean it's bad? And she'd flip over another card. She said, this is going to be horrible. And she'd just say all of these dramatic things every time she'd flip a card over. And finally, I'd be in tears and crying. It's like, what's so bad? What's going to happen? And she would say, well, tonight, after you go to sleep, somebody is going to break into the house and kill you. Now, can you imagine what that does to a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old? Can you imagine how that messes you up, how that puts you in incredible fear and incredible horror? And then you couple that with all of these stories about the ghosts and the dead people coming out of the graveyard. And if I did something wrong, if I did something that she didn't like, there was an owl that you could hear that nested somewhere in the trees, and she would tell me, she'd say, if you don't do what I tell you to do, then tonight that owl is going to come in your sleep and is going to peck your eyes out, and you'll wake up tomorrow and you'll be blind. And so every day with her was this day. I never knew what I was going to wake up to. I never knew what kind of horror, what kind of fear that I was actually going to be facing that day. And I could just go on down this incredible list. I've told this story before, and it's amazing how many people laugh when they first hear this story because they don't, but after a few minutes you go, whoa, wait a minute, this is incredibly sick. Because one of those nights, after telling me one of these horror stories about how I was going to get killed in the night, someone was going to break in and murder me in the night. So she makes me go to bed by myself. So I'm scared to death. And like any little kid, man, you just curl up in a ball in the center of the mattress because you're just scared to death. And like every little kid, you're always afraid that whatever it is that's going to get you is under the bed. Sometime in the night, my grandmother, I guess she got on her hands and knees and crawled into this room and crawled up under the bed, and at some point in the night reached out from under the bed and grabbed me by the leg. Now, something, like I said, I've told this story and people bust out laughing like that's the funniest thing they've ever heard. Let me tell you something. When you're 4 or 5 years old, and you've had an adult tell you that during the night somebody is going to break into the house and murder you, and you wake up in the middle of the night and somebody is in fact, it seems like trying to drag you out of the bed, you can't imagine the horror that creates. You cannot imagine what that does to you. And see, fear and unbelief are cousins. And fear devastates you. Fear makes it impossible for you to trust anybody. Fear makes it impossible for you to function as a whole, well human being. Fear breaks your heart. It destroys your soul and your mind and every aspect of your being. And it affects every single relationship that you have. Your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, with your parents, with your siblings, and ultimately with the people that you're going to try to fall in love with. But one of the most devastating things that my grandmother ever did to me was this. Like any little kid, I wanted a father. My father was gone all the time. The only time he ever came home, he was come home drunk, beat my mother up, steal all of her food, and leave. And that was pretty much all I knew of a dad my whole life. And so I wanted a father like all the other little kids had. I wanted somebody to play with me and teach me things and show me how to do things, show me how to work on a car, all that kind of stuff. And so one day my grandmother, she called me out to the front porch of her house, and we sat out on her steps. She opened up her catalog. Well, no, actually, I don't remember if this part of it was on the steps. But she opened up the catalog, and she flipped through to the men's suits, were pictures of men modeling suits. And she said, I want you to look in here. She said, we're going to order you a daddy. Well, man, I'm a little kid. I'm thinking, what? She said, yeah, we're going to order you a daddy. Man, I'm thinking, I'm finally going to find somebody that's going to love my mother, that's going to take care of me, and we're going to finally have a happy family, and it's going to be safe, and all these kinds of things. And so, I picked out the person that a little kid looking at pictures that would be a great dad. And so she said, fine, it's done. So I don't know if it was days or weeks that went by. I've never been good with time, and I wasn't good with time, especially when I was a kid. But I remember just over and over asking her, when's he going to come? When's my daddy going to come? When's my new daddy going to come? And so, finally one day she sets me down and she says to me on some, I can't remember exact words, but basically, look, he's not coming because nobody wants to be your daddy. Well, I want to tell you something. That whole ordeal and the way that made me feel, it made me have this sense that there was something deeply wrong with me, something so flawed in me that I couldn't have a daddy. I couldn't my own daddy didn't want me and our family. Nobody else wanted me and my family, and so I'm telling you, this did something to me. So all of my life, the thing I wanted more than anything was a family. Wanted somebody to love. And so because of that, I would just jump into these relationships that were always, codependent. And see, I want to tell you something. When a broken heart is driving your choices are nearly always the wrong choices. Because if you're not whole, you can't spot somebody that's whole. If you're not whole, you don't attract people that are whole. People that are whole, they don't want to come and make payments on your emotional debt. They don't want to come and have to deal with all the issues that you have in life because of your past. And so number one, I pretty much always picked incredibly codependent, dysfunctional women to have relationships with. I'm not saying they were bad women. I'm not saying that they were any worse than me. I'm not even saying that the problems that we had were all their fault or all my fault. I am just saying dysfunctional people hook up with, connect with, fall in love, or as close to as we know love, with other hurting, dysfunctional people. And so that meant any relationship that I got into, it was destructive, just from the word go. But here was the interesting thing. Every time I got into a relationship with a stable person, very young, even though I was a runaway, my first year that I ran away from home, I played high school football. And so, you know what? I was a good football player. I attracted the popular girls. Started a band, when I was 14. So you're in a band, you attract girls. So I started attracting a whole different group of girls, but the crazy thing was my whole teenage years and my whole young adult years, if I got into a relationship that was healthy, that was good, I was going to blow it up just as soon as this thing started becoming something solid and something safe. Because even though I wanted safety, I didn't know what it felt like. Even though I wanted love, I didn't know what that felt like. Even though I wanted all these good things, they were threatening to me. And that's what's happening in your life. All of the things that you want threaten you when you find them, or you don't know what the real thing looks like, so you never find the real thing. And so I would find myself over and over and over again destroying relationships, breaking other people's hearts, devastating them just like I had been devastated. Even though that wasn't really my intention, that wasn't really my plan. Now I want you to know something. I have ministered in churches and shared my story, a lot more details of it than this, and I've never ministered on this subject and given an altar call that at least 70% of the church didn't come forward. Because everybody's suffering from a broken heart in some area or to some degree. Listen, don't go away. I'm going to be back in just a few minutes. I'm going to show you what to do. Man, I really hope you're going to get this series, Freedom from Emotional Debt, because I'm going to give you access to some free things to add to the series. They're going to give you some exercises to do so that you will see some immediate results. You will instantaneously put an end to your pain. Be sure and get this series today. Listen, I am raising up an army of disciples. I don't like to use the word army because that sounds too militant, because I'm not trying to call you to something militant. But I am raising up an army of disciples, not just an army of Christians, an army of disciples to reach 1 billion people around the world. And we've got all kinds of ways that you can do this. Operation 1 Billion is starting Bible schools all over the world, teaching third world countries, teaching them the gospel of grace and peace and 3 days that changed the world, the love of God, all of these things. And they are taking this message to the ends of the earth. We have programs in America and around the world. And we believe that over the next few years, we will reach 1 billion people who stand up and are disciples. And I want you to help me with Operation 1 Billion. Touch base with me. Become a part of the team. Let's change the way the world sees God. You know, the scripture that I read to you from the book of Proverbs at the beginning of this, it talks about how the words of the wicked, or you could say wicked words, lie in wait for your blood. I'm telling you, every time you get the opportunity for success, for love, or whatever area of your life was decimated in the past and it hasn't been healed and restored, those wicked words, those wicked things that you've heard or seen, they're going to rise up and they're going to affect you. And we've talked about this. They're going to set off in you a cascade of neurochemicals that are stronger than heroin, stronger than cocaine. They're going to drag you into some place emotionally and physiologically that you can't get out of, as long as those patterns can run in your life. But I want to tell you something. That scripture also goes on to say that the mouth of the upright will deliver them, which could also say that an upright mouth is what delivers people. Now, the word wicked many times in the book of Proverbs is simply the word crooked. And the word righteous or upright is simply the word straight. What does that mean? You see, if you've got a straight heart, then that means that which God says about you and is deposited into your spirit, man, and that which you say about you and you have deposited into your mind by the renewing of your mind, they are straight. They form a straight line. There is no crookedness. They are not bent in any way. And I want to tell you that whenever these things begin to come on you, these situations, these thoughts, these feelings, you have to open your mouth and do something about this. Now, I know that there's been a lot of crazy things taught about confession, and don't go there, but all I'm saying is this. You have to say what the Bible says about you when you begin to have feelings, thoughts, and emotions that are contrary to what the Bible says about you. And no matter whether you can grasp it or not, that's what you've got to say. And as much as possible, you want to create those kinds of emotions, because with an upright mouth, you'll stop these words that are stealing your blood.